Hey, everyone, welcome back to the English Hour. I'm your host. E- and today we've got a special guest with us, Jacob. How's it going, Jacob?
Hey,
It's going great. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here and chat. Absolutely, I'm so glad you're here. So, Jacob, let's start with something simple. How did you first get into learning English? Was it something you always wanted to do?
yeah, actually it was. I remember being really interested in movies and TV shows in English when I was younger. I wanted to understand all the jokes and references, so that's when I started paying more attention to learning.
That's awesome. A lot of people have that moment when they realize they want to learn a language because of entertainment. Did you have any specific strategies when you first started learning?
I did. At first, I just started by watching shows with subtitles. Then I started repeating lines out loud, trying to mimic the accents. It wasn't perfect, but it helped me get more comfortable with speaking.
That's a fantastic way to learn, especially with pronunciation. Do you think watching movies and TV shows is the best way to improve your speaking skills? Or are there other methods that have worked for you?
Honestly, I think it's a combination of things. Watching movies helped me get a feel for the language, but I also practiced speaking with people. Conversation is key. Even if I made mistakes, I learned so much from those real interactions.
So true, speaking with people, especially native speakers, can be such a game changer. What about reading and writing? Do you think those are equally important in language learning?
Definitely. For me, reading was a big help in expanding my vocabulary. I started reading simple books, then worked my way up to more complex texts. Writing was tricky at first, but I found journaling to be really useful. It helped me organize my thoughts in English.
I love that idea. Journaling really makes you think critically about how to express yourself. Do you have any tips for anyone who might feel nervous about speaking in English?
Yeah, I think the biggest tip is to not be afraid of making mistakes. Everyone does it, and it's part of the learning process. The more you speak, the more natural it becomes. Just dive in and don't worry too much about being perfect.
That's such great advice. It's all about getting out of your comfort zone, right? Now, speaking of comfort zones, do you ever find yourself stuck in a language learning rut? If so, how do you break through it?
Oh, absolutely. There are times when I felt like I wasn't progressing, especially with grammar. When that happens, I try to mix things up. I might watch a documentary in English or try reading a genre I wouldn't normally pick. It shakes things up and keeps it interesting.
That's a great strategy. Changing things up keeps your brain engaged. Do you also practice speaking outside of your lessons? Maybe in real world situations.
All the time. I try to find opportunities to speak English whenever I can. If I'm at a cafe, I'll practice ordering in English. Or if I'm traveling, I make it a point to speak with locals in English, even if it's just small talk. It helps you gain confidence.
Love that. Those everyday situations really make a difference. So, Jacob, how do you feel about using apps or online resources for learning? Do you think they're useful?
They can definitely be helpful. I've used a few apps to work on vocabulary and grammar. The thing with apps is that they're great for self-paced learning, but I think it's important to balance it with speaking practice too. It's easy to get stuck just using apps and forgetting about real conversation.
Yes, I totally agree. Apps are amazing tools, but the real progress comes from engaging with people and practicing conversation. Now, let's talk about listening. Some learners struggle with understanding spoken English, especially when it's fast. Any tips for improving listening skills?
I've been there, for sure. One thing that helped me was slowing down the speed on videos or podcasts. It allowed me to catch more words and phrases. Over time, I'd increase the speed as I got more comfortable. Also, try listening to different accents. It really broadens your understanding.
That's an excellent tip. I've done the same with podcasts. It helps you catch everything and get used to different speaking speeds. What about writing in English? How do you stay motivated to write regularly?
Writing was something I had to work on consistently. At first, I wasn't sure what to write about, but I made it a habit to write about my day, even in a short journal. And I always tried to write in a way that sounded natural, like I would speak. It makes it feel more personal and less like homework.
I love that approach. Making writing personal and less formal makes it more fun and less intimidating. Speaking of less intimidating, do you have any advice for people who are learning English, but feel overwhelmed by how much there is to learn?
For sure. First, remember that learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. Take it one step at a time. Focus on the basics first, and don't worry about mastering everything all at once. The more you practice, the more it all starts to click together.
Exactly, little steps lead to big progress. Now, we've talked a lot about the practical side of learning English. But let's get into the fun side. Do you have a favorite English phrase or idiom that you've come across in your learning?
Oh, that's a tough one, but I'd say break the ice. It's just a fun way of talking about starting a conversation. I love how it sounds, and it's such a great phrase for social situations. I actually use it a lot when I meet new people.
Haha, I love that one too. It's such a perfect example of how English can be playful. Do you have a favorite TV show or movie that helped you with your English?
Definitely. I loved watching Friends. It's filled with everyday conversations and so many funny phrases. I'd watch an episode and then go back to rewatch it with subtitles to catch things I missed the first time. It really helped me.
Friends is such a classic. The humor and natural dialogue make it a great tool for learning. So, Jacob, we've been talking for a while now. Do you have any final thoughts for people who are just starting out on their English learning journey?
I'd say don't be discouraged if it feels slow at first. Every small step counts. Celebrate the little victories, like understanding a word in a song or having a short conversation with someone. Keep at it, and you'll get better every day.
Absolutely. It's all about the journey, not just the destination. Thanks so much for sharing all your insights today, Jacob. I'm sure our listeners are going to find this conversation super helpful. All right, Jacob, we've been talking about learning English. But let's dive into some fun personal stuff now. You mentioned Friends as one of your favorite shows. But what other kinds of shows or movies do you enjoy watching in English?
Hmm. Well, aside from Friends, I've really gotten into shows like Stranger Things and The Office. They're not only entertaining, but also offer a lot of cultural references that help with understanding idiomatic English. And honestly, I've learned a lot from how people interact in those shows, whether it's in formal language or how they joke around.
Those are great choices. Stranger Things has such a unique mix of casual and dramatic speech. And The Office is perfect for learning how to use humor in conversation. What's your take on the different accents in English? Have you found it challenging to understand accents from different regions?
Definitely at first, I struggled a lot with different accents, especially British English. The way they say certain words can be so different from American English, and it took some time for me to get used to. But once I started listening more actively, I realized I could pick up on the rhythm and pronunciation differences. Now, I kind of enjoy hearing different accents. It feels like a puzzle I'm trying to solve.
Oh, I totally get that. I think accents make learning English even more interesting. Plus, they add so much personality to the language. So, do you think understanding different accents is important for someone who wants to become fluent in English?
Absolutely. If you plan to travel or interact with people from different English speaking countries, it's super helpful. Understanding different accents also makes you more confident when you're in real conversations, and it helps you feel less overwhelmed by the variety of ways English is spoken.
That's such a great point. It's all about being prepared for the real world and not getting thrown off by a new accent. Now, let's talk about the tech side of things. There are so many apps, websites, and language exchange platforms. Have you ever used any of them? And if so, which ones would you recommend?
Oh, for sure, I've used a couple of apps like Duolingo and Babbel to practice vocabulary and grammar. They're great for building a foundation, but I think they work best when combined with real-world practice. As for language exchange, I've used Tandem. It's a platform where you can connect with native speakers and practice conversation, which I think is one of the best ways to learn.
Nice. I've heard great things about Tandem. The ability to practice with native speakers in a relaxed environment is such a game changer. But I'm curious, do you think there are any drawbacks to relying too much on tech and apps for language learning?
Yes, there's definitely a risk of over relying on apps and forgetting about actual conversation. You might master all the vocabulary, but without speaking practice, it's hard to get used to the flow of the language. Plus, apps can't give you that real time feedback and context that you get from interacting with people.
That's so true. I've heard people say that apps are like a great supplement, but they can't replace the human connection aspect of language learning. Speaking of human connections, do you find it easier to learn when you're talking to people who are also learning, or when you're chatting with native speakers?
Honestly, both have their benefits. When I talk with other learners, it's nice because we can relate to each other's struggles and we're patient with mistakes. But native speakers push me to think on my feet more. They also teach me expressions and phrases I might not come across in a textbook.
That makes sense. Native speakers can give you that authentic feel of the language, while fellow learners help you stay motivated. Have you ever had a conversation in English that was really memorable or challenging for you?
Oh, for sure, I remember having a conversation with a shopkeeper in London. My accent must have been so different, and at first, I could tell they weren't sure if they understood me. But as we kept talking, we both kind of relaxed. In the end, it was one of those moments where I realized I'd made real progress. It was challenging, but rewarding at the same time.
That's such a cool story. It must have felt amazing to push through that challenge and realize how far you've come. What would you say is the hardest part of learning English for you personally?
I think the hardest part for me was mastering the tenses and figuring out when to use them properly. It's tricky because English has so many variations, and if you use the wrong tense, the meaning can change completely. But over time, with practice and more exposure to different contexts, it became clearer.
Tenses can definitely be tricky. English has a lot of rules that can be tough to remember, but once you understand them, they really start to make sense. Do you have any advice for people who are struggling with grammar or vocabulary?
I'd say, don't stress over getting everything perfect right away. Grammar and vocabulary are something you improve with time. A good tip is to focus on learning phrases and sentences instead of just individual words. That way you can speak more naturally, and it'll be easier to remember how to use grammar correctly.
That's such a smart approach. Learning chunks of language instead of isolated words really helps make everything flow better. Now, moving back to the fun side, if you could live in any English-speaking country for a month, where would you go? And why?
I think I'd go to New Zealand. The scenery is absolutely stunning, and I've heard the people there are incredibly friendly. Plus, I think it would be cool to experience a different variation of English with all the unique slang they have there.
New Zealand is such a beautiful place, and you're right, their slang is one of a kind. It's always fun to pick up new expressions from different places. All right, Jacob, let's wrap up with one last question. What's the best way to stay motivated when learning English feels overwhelming?
The best way is to keep reminding yourself why you started in the first place. Whether it's for personal growth, travel, or career opportunities, always keep your goals in mind. And remember, progress is progress even if it's slow.
I couldn't agree more. Keeping that end goal in sight makes all the difference. Well, Jacob, this has been such a great conversation. Thanks for sharing your journey and insights with us today. I'm sure our listeners have learned so much from you.
Thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I hope everyone finds something useful in our conversation. I'm sure they will. We'll be back next time with more tips and stories. Stay tuned. Before we wrap up today's chat, Jacob, you mentioned earlier that you've picked up on expressions and phrases that you wouldn't have learned through textbooks. Can you share some of your favorite phrases or slang that you've come across in your English learning journey.
Oh, definitely. One of my favorites has to be barking up the wrong tree. It's just such a fun way to say someone is making a mistake or focusing on the wrong thing. I also love break the ice. It's perfect for when you're starting a conversation and want to make people feel more comfortable. And I'll never forget the first time I heard someone say, "I'm all ears." I had no idea what it meant, but now I use it all the time when I want someone to know I'm listening attentively.
Those are some classic ones. I think, barking up the wrong tree is definitely a phrase that throws a lot of learners off at first. But once you get the hang of it, you'll hear it everywhere. How about you? Have you ever used a phrase incorrectly in a conversation? Maybe it wasn't quite right, but you kept going anyway.
Oh, for sure. I've definitely had those awkward moments. One time I tried to say, "I'm feeling a bit under the weather," but I accidentally said, "I'm feeling a bit under the feather." Everyone laughed, and I felt so embarrassed, but it was a good learning moment because now I'll always remember that phrase correctly.
Haha, that's so relatable. It's those little mix-ups that really stick in your memory though. But at the end of the day, it's all about taking those mistakes in stride. The more you laugh at yourself, the more you learn. Speaking of learning, what do you think has been the most effective method for you to remember new vocabulary?
For me, it's all about context. I don't just try to memorize lists of words. I focus on using the new vocabulary in sentences or conversations. For example, if I learn a new word, I make an effort to use it in a conversation or write it down in a journal. The more I use the word in context, the more it sticks. I also find that reading books or listening to podcasts in English helps reinforce the vocabulary in my mind.
That's such a smart method. Context really helps words come alive, and it makes them easier to recall when you need them. Do you ever revisit old vocabulary or phrases you've learned in the past?
Absolutely. Every once in a while, I'll go through my old notebooks and review the words I've written down. Sometimes, I even go back to old conversations or episodes of shows I watched just to see how much I've improved or to remind myself of things I might have forgotten. It's a great way to make sure the knowledge sticks.
That's a fantastic approach. It's so easy to forget things after you've learned them, but reviewing and going back to them helps you keep everything fresh. Now, what about listening skills? I know we've touched on it a little, but when you're trying to improve your listening comprehension, do you have any go-to strategies?
One thing that really helped me was listening to the same audio or watching the same episode of a show multiple times. The first time, I'd focus on understanding the overall meaning, and then the second time, I'd pay attention to the details, like pronunciation and intonation. I'd also slow down the audio when I didn't understand something. It may sound a little tedious, but it's so effective.
I love that method. It's like you're peeling back layers to get the full picture of what's being said. Slowing down the audio is a great way to catch the small details without feeling overwhelmed. Have you ever tried using subtitles while listening to English media?
Yes, definitely. When I first started, I used subtitles in my native language, then switched to English subtitles as I got better. The shift to English subtitles was a game changer. It really helped me connect the written word to the spoken one. Now, I don't need subtitles most of the time, but I still turn them on occasionally to double check things.
Subtitles can make such a difference, especially when you're still building your vocabulary. They also help you see the spelling and structure of words, which is great for reinforcing your learning. Do you find that you understand native English speakers more now than you did when you first started learning?
For sure, at the beginning, I'd get lost in conversations, especially when people spoke quickly or used slang. But now, I can follow most conversations without too much trouble, even if they're talking fast. I think a big part of it is just exposing myself to different accents and ways of speaking. Over time, my ear has become more attuned to the rhythm of English.
That's awesome to hear. It really shows how much progress you've made. It's all about exposure and practice. Do you have any tips for people who might be struggling with listening comprehension? especially when they feel like they're not improving fast enough.
If you feel stuck, my advice is to keep at it and stay patient with yourself. Sometimes progress isn't as obvious as you want it to be, but it's happening little by little. Also, try not to put too much pressure on yourself to understand everything right away. If you don't get something, just move on and revisit it later. Over time, your brain will start connecting the dots.
That's such a solid piece of advice. It's easy to get frustrated when it feels like you're not making progress. But it's important to remember that language learning is a marathon, not a sprint. So, let's get back to something a little more personal. If you could give yourself advice from when you first started learning English, what would you tell yourself?
I tell myself not to be so afraid of making mistakes. Early on, I was so focused on saying everything perfectly that I missed out on a lot of opportunities to speak and practice. If I had just relaxed and embraced the mistakes, I would have learned much faster. So, I'd tell myself speak up, make mistakes, and keep learning.
I think that's advice we could all use. Sometimes we get so caught up in perfection that we forget the real goal is communication. So, Jacob, before we continue on with more of your thoughts, I want to ask, what are your future goals when it comes to English? Do you plan to keep improving? Or do you have any new language-related aspirations?
My goal is to keep improving my fluency, especially in writing. I feel pretty comfortable speaking now, but writing in English is still something I want to get better at. I'm also thinking about learning another language eventually, so I'll apply everything I've learned about language acquisition to that. It's exciting to think about all the possibilities.
I love that. It's all about continuous growth, and you seem to have a real passion for learning. Do you think learning English has opened up new doors for you, both professionally and personally?
Definitely. On the professional side, knowing English has opened up so many more job opportunities for me. I can work with international teams, attend global conferences, and connect with a whole new network of people. On a personal level, it's made traveling much more enjoyable, and I've been able to form friendships with people from all over the world.
That's amazing, Jacob. It's so inspiring to hear how English has played a role in your personal and professional growth. It really shows the power of language, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Language is the bridge that connects us to the world, and I feel so fortunate to have learned it. Every day, I find new ways to use English to connect, learn, and grow.
And with that attitude, I have no doubt you'll keep achieving amazing things. Thanks again, Jacob, for this wonderful conversation. There's so much for our listeners to take away from today, and I'm sure they'll be as inspired as I am. Let's continue to explore more tips, tricks, and stories to keep our English learning journey going strong. Absolutely, Jacob. You've shared so much valuable insight already. Now, shifting gears a little, how do you stay motivated to keep learning? Because, let's be honest, sometimes it can feel like a challenge to stay consistent, especially on those tough days.
That's a great question. For me, motivation comes from setting small, achievable goals. I try to break down my learning into manageable chunks, like learning 10 new words a week or watching one episode of a series without subtitles. I also love tracking my progress, whether it's revisiting something I learned a few weeks ago or realizing how much more I can understand now compared to when I started. Seeing that progress really keeps me going.
That's such a smart strategy. Breaking it down into small goals makes it feel less overwhelming. I think a lot of people might shy away from the process because they focus on the end result instead of the small victories along the way. Do you ever celebrate your milestones, no matter how small they are?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's important to celebrate those wins. For example, after I finish reading a book in English or watch an entire series without needing subtitles, I'll treat myself to something small, maybe a favorite snack or a movie night. It's a way to reward yourself for the hard work and give yourself a little boost to keep going.
That's a great way to maintain a positive mindset throughout the learning process. You're right. Recognizing those achievements helps us stay motivated. Now, let's talk about practice. Some people are shy or feel embarrassed when practicing speaking, especially when they don't feel like their English is perfect. How do you overcome that fear of speaking?
That's definitely a big challenge for many learners, and I've been there myself. The best advice I can give is to start small and focus on the purpose of communication, not perfection. I think it's really important to remind yourself that no one expects you to speak perfectly all the time. The goal is to get your message across. I also practice with language partners, people who are patient and understanding, and that makes me feel more comfortable.
Yes, communication is the key, not perfection. And you're right, practicing with supportive people makes a huge difference. It's less about judgment and more about making the effort. Do you have any tips for how to find those practice partners or language exchanges?
Absolutely, there are plenty of websites and apps like Tandem or HelloTalk that connect you with language partners from all around the world. I've met so many great people who are also looking to improve their English. You can do text exchanges, voice calls, or even video chats. Another tip is to join local language meetups or online communities like forums or social media groups. The more you put yourself out there, the easier it gets.
Those are fantastic resources. It's amazing how many platforms exist now that make finding language partners so easy. Speaking of online communities, have you ever joined any forums or social media groups for English learners? How has that helped you?
Yes, definitely. I've joined a couple of Facebook groups and Reddit communities for English learners. Being part of those groups has been great because you can ask questions, get advice, and share your own experiences. It's also comforting to know that other people are facing the same challenges as you. Plus, I've gotten some really helpful feedback on my writing and speaking from native speakers.
That's so encouraging to hear. Online communities can provide such a sense of camaraderie. It's like you're not learning alone anymore, right? And getting feedback from native speakers is such a valuable way to improve. Let's dive into a slightly different area: cultural context. Do you think understanding the culture behind the language helps you learn English more effectively?
Oh, absolutely. Understanding the culture behind a language is crucial because it gives you a deeper appreciation for how the language is used. For example, knowing the history behind certain expressions or idioms can really help you understand why they're used the way they are. Plus, learning about the culture helps you connect with the people who speak the language and engage in more meaningful conversations.
That's so true. Language is not just about words, it's about connecting with people and understanding their background. Have you ever had a cultural misunderstanding while speaking English? How did you navigate through that?
Actually, yes, I remember once I was talking to a friend from the UK and I used the phrase take a piss, thinking it meant something like taking a break or resting. Turns out, it's actually a slang term for going to the bathroom. My friend was pretty confused and I was really embarrassed. But we laughed it off and I learned a lot about British slang from that.
Oh my gosh, that's such a funny example. But I think that's a great way to learn. You mess up, laugh, and move on with more knowledge than before. It's all part of the process. That brings me to my next question. Do you find it helpful to learn English through different types of media, like music, movies?
Yes, definitely. I think the variety of media is so important because it gives you exposure to different accents, slang, and even different formalities of the language. For example, listening to music has helped me with pronunciation, while watching movies helps with understanding context and emotions. Podcasts like this one are fantastic because you get to hear real conversations and practice listening to natural speech.
I couldn't agree more. The diversity in media is so helpful. It's like you're learning the language in all its forms. What about reading? Do you think reading is just as important as listening or speaking?
I think reading is crucial for vocabulary building and understanding sentence structures. I've read a lot of English books, articles, and even blogs, and they've expanded my knowledge of the language. The more you read, the more you get familiar with different ways to express yourself. Plus, Reading helps you see the correct grammar and word usage in context.
Exactly. It's not just about knowing words. It's about seeing how those words fit together in natural speech or writing. Have you noticed any particular improvements in your writing since you've started reading more?
Yes, definitely. My writing has become more fluid and natural. I find that I use a wider range of vocabulary, and I've picked up on certain nuances in sentence structure that I wouldn't have noticed before. I'm more confident writing emails and messages, which has helped a lot in my professional life as well.
That's awesome to hear. It's great to see how reading has helped you in both casual and professional situations. Now, speaking of professional life, how important do you think English is in the workplace today?
I think English is incredibly important, especially if you're working in an international environment. Many companies require employees to speak English, and it's the language of business, after all. It opens doors for collaboration with teams across different countries and allows you to access global markets. Even if English isn't your first language, being able to communicate in English can make you stand out in the job market.
So true. English is definitely the global language of business. It sounds like your English skills have really paid off professionally. What's next for you in your career, Jacob? Do you have any new language-related goals?
I'm looking to expand my skill set, actually. Aside from improving my writing in English, I'm hoping to learn Spanish. It's the next language I want to tackle, and I'm excited to apply what I've learned about language learning to a new language. I think it'll be an exciting challenge.
That's so exciting. I have no doubt you'll crush it just like you did with English. And I can't wait to hear all about your journey with Spanish. Keep pushing yourself and keep learning, Jacob. You've come so far. And I know there's even more success ahead.
Thank you so much, Sophia. It's definitely going to be a challenge, but I'm excited. I think the key is to keep that motivation alive and enjoy the process. And hey, we can always help each other out, right? Maybe one day we can do a podcast episode in both English and Spanish.
I love that idea. A bilingual episode would be so fun and practical for our listeners too. It would give them a chance to hear both languages and compare how they're used. What do you think? Jacob, would you feel comfortable doing that?
I think I'd be up for it. It's always fun to try something new, and it would be a great way to push myself further. Plus, we could give some tips to our audience about language learning strategies in both languages. I'm already looking forward to it.
That sounds like such a cool plan. We'll definitely make it happen in the future. But for now, let's talk a little bit about language learning methods. Since you've had experience with both formal and informal learning, what do you think are the main advantages of each?
That's a great question. I think formal learning, like taking classes or following a structured curriculum, provides a solid foundation. You get the rules, the grammar, and a clear path forward. But informal learning, like talking with native speakers, watching movies, or listening to music, helps you apply what you've learned in real-world situations. It's more flexible and fun, and it keeps the process interesting.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely. The balance between structure and flexibility is key. It's almost like formal learning gives you the tools, and informal learning helps you sharpen them in everyday conversations. Which one do you personally prefer? Or do you like a mix of both?
I'd say I like a mix of both. There are days when I feel like I need to brush up on grammar, so I'll go through some formal exercises. But then, on other days, I'll just watch a series or chat with someone in English to practice what I've learned. The mix keeps me from getting bored and also helps me stay engaged in different ways.
That sounds like a perfect balance. It's all about keeping the learning experience dynamic and enjoyable. Let's dive into one last area: motivation killers. Sometimes, learners feel stuck or demotivated when progress seems slow. Have you ever faced those moments? And how do you push through?
Oh, definitely. There are times when I feel like I'm not improving as fast as I'd like, and it can be really discouraging. But I've learned to remind myself that learning a language is a long-term journey, and slow progress is still progress. One thing that really helps is taking a step back and looking at how far I've come. I'll reflect on how much more comfortable I feel with the language now compared to when I first started. That usually puts things into perspective.
That's such a healthy mindset. It's easy to get caught up in wanting instant results. But like you said, reflecting on where you were at the beginning can really put things into perspective. What other things do you do to maintain that positive outlook during tough times?
Another thing I do is focus on the joy of learning itself rather than just the end result. Sometimes I get too caught up in, I need to be fluent or I need to pass this test. But when I focus on how interesting the process is, learning about different cultures, understanding new ways to express myself, it makes the journey feel more enjoyable. And of course, talking to fellow learners keeps me motivated. It's nice to remind yourself that you're not alone in the struggle.
Yes, that's so important. Reconnecting with the joy of learning, rather than just focusing on results, can really change your perspective. And talking to others who are going through the same thing makes all the difference. You've shared so many amazing insights today, Jacob. I think a lot of listeners are going to feel encouraged and inspired by what you've said.
Thanks, Sophia. I'm so happy to be able to share my experiences. Learning English is a journey, and it's great to talk about it in such an open and supportive way. If I can help even one person feel more motivated or confident, then that's amazing.
You're absolutely doing that, Jacob. And I think we're helping a lot more people than we realize. Conversations like this are what really make the learning process feel relatable and achievable. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. And you've certainly shown that today.
Thanks so much, Sophia. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's been great to reflect on my language learning journey, and I hope everyone listening feels encouraged to keep going, no matter where they are in their learning process.
I'm sure they will. And who knows? Maybe we'll come back next time with a bilingual episode. Thanks for being such an awesome guest, Jacob. I've learned so much from you today, and I'm sure our listeners have too.
Anytime, Sophia, I had a blast chatting with you. Looking forward to our next conversation, whether it's about language learning, culture, or anything else.
Same here. Let's keep learning and growing together. Thanks to all of you for tuning in today, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Keep learning, keep practicing, and remember progress is what matters.
Absolutely. Until next time.